I smiled the morning my parents disowned me. Not because it didn't hurt. It did. It felt like someone had erased my name from my own bloodline. But I smiled because for the first time in 6 years, I was free. I was the daughter who paid the rent. The sister who covered the debt. The blessing God supposedly sent to save the family. And the joke they told behind my back. They thought cutting me off would scare me into obedience. They thought I would crawl back. They had no idea I had already done the math. 24 hours later, their phones were ringing in panic, and mine was finally silent. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about what happens when a woman stops financing her own humiliation. So before we begin, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been the strong one? The responsible one? The one everyone leans on, but no one protects? If that's you, stay with me. This story might feel uncomfortably familiar. And if you believe that quiet strength is more powerful than loud revenge, like this video so more people who need it can find it. Comment, I choose myself, if you've ever had to walk away to survive. And subscribe, because some stories don't just entertain you, they remind you who you are. Now let me tell you how everything collapsed in 8 minutes. Before I became the villain in my own family's story, I was their solution. At 32, I was the youngest CFO in my company's regional division. I had built my reputation on precision, risk analysis, restructuring failing portfolios, forecasting collapses before they happened. I didn't believe in luck. I believed in leverage. But the numbers I managed at work were cleaner than the ones in my personal life. 6 years earlier, when my father Daniel's construction business went bankrupt, I didn't hesitate. I remember the night he called me. His voice cracked. He said creditors were circling. That the house was at risk. That the family's reputation would be destroyed. Olivia, you're the only one who can fix this, he said. And I believed him. I moved money without drama. Paid off urgent debts. Upgraded their rental to a luxury penthouse because he said, image matters. Covered my mother Ruth's premium health insurance because she said stress was affecting her heart. Cleared my sister Emily's university loans because she deserved a fresh start. At first, it felt noble. Strategic. Temporary. But temporary stretched into years. Every month, automated transfers left my account like clockwork. Rent. Credit cards. Travel. Club memberships. Even Emily's spontaneous mental health trips to Napa. Over $220,000 in 6 years. At church, my parents were praised as pillars of resilience. My father led financial stewardship workshops. My mother mentored young wives. Emily volunteered in the youth ministry. I sat in the back pew, unnoticed. No one ever mentioned that the family miracle had a wire transfer attached to it. I told myself it was fine. That strength meant carrying more. That loyalty meant silence. But strength without boundaries isn't virtue. It's access. And I was about to learn exactly how accessible I had become. My father never demanded. He implied. Family takes care of family, Daniel would say, resting his palm over his Bible like it was a contract. God blessed you so you could bless us. It sounded spiritual. It felt transactional. My mother Ruth reinforced it gently. You're our miracle, Olivia. We raised you right. Raised me right meant I didn't say no. Emily, my older sister, adapted fastest. Designer bags replaced discount brands. Brunches became networking events. She started posting filtered photos of a gratitude while tagging luxury locations I paid for. When I once suggested downsizing the penthouse, my father's smile disappeared. After everything we sacrificed for you? That sentence was always the weapon. At church, they were admired. Daniel led prayer circles about financial wisdom. Ruth spoke about unity. Emily laughed with friends who called our family blessed. No one knew the blessing had a routing number. I started noticing patterns. Every time I hesitated about a payment, guilt appeared within minutes. Scripture. Tears. Stories about hardship. It wasn't chaos. It was conditioning. And I was beginning to realize something uncomfortable. They didn't need me emotionally. They needed my consistency. But what would happen if that consistency disappeared? The first real crack didn't come from an argument. It came from laughter. It was my father's 60th birthday. The penthouse terrace was full, church leaders, family friends, polished smiles. I had paid for the catering, the string quartet, the custom cake with gold trim. I stepped away to take a call from work. When I came back, I heard my name. Emily was holding a champagne glass, slightly flushed, surrounded by friends. Honestly, she said, laughing. Olivia's basically our walking ATM. Someone raised a toast. To the family bank. Another voice added, as long as she keeps working, you're set for life. They all laughed. My father didn't correct them. My mother didn't look uncomfortable. They smiled. I stood behind a pillar, invisible again. The next morning, my Uncle Mark sent me something. An audio file. Thought you should hear this, he wrote. It was the same conversation. Clearer. Louder. Emily calling me, the ATM. Friends joking that all they had to do was text and money would appear. My father saying, she feels responsible. It's easy. Easy. I listened to it 3 times. I didn't cry. I opened a spreadsheet instead. And for the first time in 6 years, I stopped thinking like a daughter. I started thinking like an auditor. And audits always reveal more than people expect. The group message arrived the next morning. No warning. No conversation. Just text. We've decided to create healthy boundaries. You've become prideful. We are cutting you off. You are no longer our daughter. Future communication will be handled by our attorney. Emily reacted with a heart emoji. I read it twice. Not for emotion. For structure. The timing wasn't random. The night before, I had quietly asked for detailed receipts for the church scholarship fund my father managed. $65,000 had moved without documentation. I didn't accuse. I asked. And suddenly I was the problem. They believed shame would pressure me back into compliance. That public rejection would make me desperate to restore approval. They assumed I would keep paying to prove loyalty. Instead, I typed, understood. No defense. No drama. Then I opened every account connected to their lifestyle. Penthouse lease, cancelled. Credit cards, frozen. Insurance, terminated. Automatic transfers, deleted. 8 minutes. 6 years of dependency ended before my coffee cooled. I knew the consequences would be immediate. What I didn't know was how fast panic travels when comfort disappears. 23 minutes. That's how long it took. My phone lit up with my mother's name first. I let it ring. Then my father. Then Emily. Then all 3 at once. Voicemails stacked quickly. Olivia, the pharmacy says the insurance is inactive. The cards aren't working. What did you do? This is abusive. You can't just cut us off. Abusive. The word almost made me laugh. For 6 years, I funded their comfort. Their image. Their influence. Now the removal of access was violence? I didn't respond. I observed. Emily texted, rent is due in 4 days. Fix this. Not please. Not can we talk. Just instruction. My father followed with scripture. Then threats. Our lawyer will handle this. Our lawyer. My ex-boyfriend, Nathan Hale. He had quietly drifted from my life months earlier, saying I was too intense. Now he was representing my parents. That detail didn't sting. It clarified. This wasn't emotional chaos. It was strategy on their side. They assumed pressure would reactivate my obedience. But pressure works both ways. And they were about to discover what happens when the person you depend on stops reacting. The hardest part wasn't canceling the payments. It was doing nothing after. Every instinct in me wanted to explain. To defend. To send a long message listing every sacrifice, every wire transfer, every birthday I spent working while they vacationed. But defense is emotional currency. And I had already paid enough. So I went silent. At work, I ran board meetings. Reviewed risk exposure reports. Approved restructuring plans. My voice stayed steady. My posture stayed controlled. At night, the silence was heavier. I replayed the audio from the birthday. Emily's laugh. My father saying, "She feels responsible. It's easy." Easy. I asked myself one question: if I go back now, what changes? Nothing. They wouldn't respect me more. They would simply adjust their tactics. So instead of reacting, I built containment. I archived every bank statement. Every transfer. Every invoice. Every text message where they demanded money and wrapped it in scripture. Not to attack. To prepare. Because if they wanted lawyers involved, I wouldn't meet them emotionally. I would meet them structurally. And structures, once examined closely, tend to reveal hidden fractures. 3 days after the cutoff, Nathan emailed me. Formal tone. Legal language. Cold. He claimed I had created financial dependency and that abruptly withdrawing support caused emotional and material damage. He implied I could be sued for destabilizing vulnerable family members. It was almost impressive. They were trying to reframe generosity as obligation. For a moment, I felt the old pull. The urge to fix. To smooth. To prevent escalation. Then I opened my master spreadsheet. 6 years. $220,418.72. Rent. Insurance. Tuition. Travel. Church donations made in my father's name. Even Emily's cosmetic procedure she called medical necessity. Dependency? No. They build comfort on voluntary access. And voluntary access can be revoked. That night, I made the real decision. Not the cancellations. Not the silence. I decided I would stop protecting their image. I wouldn't insult them. I wouldn't yell. I would present facts. If their power came from reputation, then reputation was the leverage point. I began drafting an email. Not emotional. Not reactive. Precise. And I knew exactly who would receive it. While I drafted, they performed. My parents showed up at church that Sunday as if nothing had happened. Smiling. Leading prayer. My father even preached about honor within the family. The irony was almost artistic. Emily went live on Instagram that afternoon. Sometimes, she said with glossy-eyed restraint, successful women let money make them arrogant. Pray for our family. She never said my name. She didn't have to. Comments flooded in. Support. Sympathy. Subtle condemnation aimed at the invisible daughter. Nathan posted a vague statement about clients facing private family hardship. Professional. Protective. Strategic. They believed they had narrative control. They assumed I would defend myself publicly, which would make me look unstable. But I didn't respond. I watched. I tracked who commented. Who shared. Which church leaders amplified the sympathy posts. Which board members of the scholarship fund liked my father's sermon clip. Patterns emerged. They were doubling down on image because image was their shield. And shields only exist when no one questions what's behind them. For the first time, I understood the full architecture of their confidence. They didn't think I would expose them. They thought I needed their approval more than I needed the truth. That miscalculation would cost them everything. They just didn't know it yet. I spent the next week quietly mapping them. Every habit. Every phrase. Every reliance on perception rather than substance. Daniel's pride was performative. Every financial claim he made in church had a veneer of transparency but lacked documentation. Ruth's interventions were emotional shields, she deflected questions with tears and scripture. Emily's arrogance was performative too, her social media carefully curated to suggest wealth she never earned. Even Nathan's professionalism had blind spots, he assumed loyalty would protect their secrets. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't send a single message. I simply watched, recorded, and waited. Late at night, I'd review the audio my uncle sent, the spreadsheet of 6 years' worth of transactions, and the dozens of texts where my family demanded money cloaked in guilt. Patterns were emerging: dependence on me, deception within the church, manipulation toward public perception. Every weakness was a lever. I began to feel something unfamiliar, not anger. Not resentment. Control. I realized they had spent years underestimating me, assuming I would continue paying to maintain their comfort and image. And I was about to test that assumption. One move, and the illusion of dominance they had built would crumble. The question lingering in my mind, would they notice the collapse before it was too late? I didn't call. I didn't warn. I acted quietly, surgically. First, I froze the accounts tied to their lifestyle. Not all at once, small, imperceptible blocks to avoid immediate suspicion. Rent transfers, club memberships, credit cards. I documented each freeze in my private ledger. Then I sent a formal notice to the bank, under my name, confirming the cancellations. No emotion. No blame. Just facts. Next, I archived every document, invoices, bank statements, texts, emails. I labeled them meticulously. Every dollar they spent from my generosity was recorded. Every laugh at my expense cataloged. At this point, I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt precision. Every action had a purpose. Every detail could become leverage. I observed their patterns: Emily's panic posts, my father's church speeches, Ruth's indirect appeals to friends. None reached me directly yet. That was fine. I didn't need engagement. I knew the moment to reveal everything publicly had to be perfect: timing, audience, and evidence all aligned. And yet, even in this silent preparation, doubt lingered. What if they discovered my strategy prematurely? What if exposure backfired, painting me as vengeful instead of just principled? I let that tension simmer. Silence was my shield, and patience my weapon. The next move would force the hand of the family, and I knew exactly when it would happen. Just when everything seemed contained, a ripple threatened to undo months of careful planning. Nathan, my ex-boyfriend turned family lawyer, began sending formal notices with increasing pressure. Threats of emotional damages, insinuations of abuse of financial control, and even veiled warnings about public perception. He was professional, cold, and cunning, precisely the kind of obstacle I had to anticipate. Meanwhile, Emily started broadcasting on Instagram, subtly framing me as the villain. It's sad when a family member thinks independence is abandonment. Church members began asking me for explanations, some whispering doubts about my intentions. For the first time, my plan required more than financial precision. I had to anticipate psychological warfare, social manipulation, and the potential for reputational attacks. Every misstep could be framed as cruelty. Every silence interpreted as weakness. I spent nights dissecting their moves, reconstructing possible narratives, and identifying which allies could be persuaded with truth instead of emotion. I needed patience, but also courage to stay unseen while the storm built around me. The stakes were higher than ever. A single leak could turn me into the villain. And yet, in that tension, I realized, exposing the truth wasn't impulsive. It was inevitable. The real question now, Would I act before they tried to destroy my credibility, or would I let them think they were still in control? To keep the plan intact, I had to give up something I valued most, invisibility. Up until now, I had moved in silence, letting their arrogance and assumptions shield me. But to break the cycle completely, I needed exposure, calculated, precise, and irreversible. I sacrificed comfort, privacy, and the illusion that I could remain unnoticed. Emails were drafted. Evidence compiled, the spreadsheets, the audio of their laughter, the texts where they mocked me. I reviewed every line, knowing one mistake could turn my moral leverage into ammunition against me. I gave up certainty, too. Once the information went out, I couldn't control the fallout. My family's panic would be immediate. Public scrutiny unavoidable. Even my own reputation could be at risk if interpreted incorrectly. Yet, the most profound sacrifice was emotional restraint. I could have raged, yelled, or exposed them with venom. But strategy demanded calm. Precision demanded detachment. My pain became tools, charts, numbers, records, rather than cries for recognition. I paused at night, staring at the ceiling. Would people see this as justice or cruelty? The answer didn't matter. I wasn't seeking approval. I was restoring balance. And with that clarity, I knew the moment to strike had arrived. The question lingered, would they understand the magnitude before it was too late? I pressed send. 211 leaders of their church received a single email. No insults. No drama. Just facts. Attached, 6 years of meticulously documented payments, every rent check, every tuition transfer, every card statement. The audio of them laughing at me. Screenshots of texts where they mocked and demanded money. And the group message where they formally disowned me. I didn't add commentary. I didn't plead for understanding. I let evidence speak. Within hours, the reaction was chaos. Pharmacies denied coverage. Credit cards declined. Church members called questioning misappropriated funds. Daniel's sermons were scrutinized. Ruth's reputation as a mentor collapsed overnight. Emily's curated Instagram world began unraveling as friends and followers questioned her complicity. Nathan, the ex-boyfriend turned lawyer, was implicated in ethical lapses, defending a family now exposed. They had assumed I would stay obedient, that silence meant compliance. They had built a castle on assumptions. I was outside it, holding the key. And as I watched notifications pile up, I felt the calmest I had in years. For the first time, their power wasn't anchored in me. It floated, exposed, fragile, and fully visible to the world. The question now, would they ever recover from the mirror I had held up? The fallout was immediate. Daniel was removed from every leadership position. Church audits revealed he had diverted $65,000 from the scholarship fund. Orders barred him from entering the building, and the fund itself was frozen, then restructured under new oversight. Every smile he had worn at Sunday service became a reminder of mismanagement and deceit. Emily's social media fame crumbled. Followers left. Friends distanced themselves. She went from designer brunches to working shifts as a cashier and server. In desperation, she tried to spin a narrative in a live Instagram video, calling me abusive and jealous. But the evidence I had sent made every claim hollow. Later, she sent a pleading email for forgiveness. I ignored it. Nathan's career imploded. The law firm investigated his involvement. He was terminated for ethical violations and had to relocate to restart his career elsewhere. Even the church congregation, once blind to the family's facade, now whispered about every hidden transaction, every laughter-filled betrayal. And through it all, I remained silent. Observing. Calm. Strategic. I hadn't destroyed anyone. I had stopped financing them. The truth had done the rest. And the quiet realization settled in, freedom didn't need anger. It needed precision. The question that lingered for me, and maybe for the audience, was simple: how long do we allow others to profit from our loyalty before we stop? 4 months later, I sat at my desk, not calculating someone else's debt, but shaping possibilities of my own. The money I had once poured into sustaining lies, comforting arrogance, and shielding hypocrisy was now the foundation of something real. I launched the Mercer Foundation, not for glory, not for control, but for those like me, young people forced to carry the weight of family, their dreams postponed, their energy drained. 412 applications arrived within weeks. 10 full scholarships were awarded. Each recipient reminded me that generosity, when anchored in truth and purpose, could transform lives instead of sustaining deception. I never responded to Emily's final emails. I never returned to Daniel or Ruth's church. My ex-boyfriend's name was irrelevant. Their panic calls and public disgrace were no longer my concern. For the first time in 6 years, I measured success not by what I gave others, but by what I could build for myself, and for those who deserve support without exploitation. I had stopped financing my own humiliation. I had stopped validating lies. I had stopped believing their narrative. And in the quiet of my office, looking out over the city I had always managed but never owned, I realized, liberation doesn't make noise. It simply arrives. Sometimes, the strongest revenge is choosing yourself. And the lingering question, for anyone who has been taken for granted, whispered in my mind, and maybe in yours, how long will you wait before you choose yourself too? If this story resonated with you, hit the like button to support content that tells the truth about strength and resilience. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against those who took advantage of your loyalty? And subscribe to the channel to follow more stories that reveal hidden power, silent victories, and the quiet strength it takes to reclaim your life.